Hey, y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle housing market watch for February 18th, 2025. Well, we are going to do something a little bit different here today. I'm adding, and you're going to have to stay towards the end, but I'm adding in some new data that I've been working on implementing here over the past few weeks, and we'll continue to improve it as we implement. But before we do that, we're going to jump into the normal stats that we've been looking at here. And as a reminder, we're looking at King and Snohomish County data on a weekly basis. My goal is to be giving insight on what's actually happening in the market. And when I started filming videos about 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago for the market updates, I wanted to share data about the market and some insight. And what I found is, especially as the market was adjusting dramatically, right? The seasonal changes, pretty easy to predict. And also a market that's steadily going up is pretty easy to talk about. But when things are changing more rapidly, it's important, I think, to have more insight in the moment. And so rather than just sharing my gut feel, I wanted to continue to add more data, which is when we started doing these market watches a few years ago. And as these have evolved, I think there's some even better data that the MLS is now collecting, having to do with how many offers have an inspection contingency or a financing contingency. I think for sellers and for buyers, this type of information is helpful. It's information that I talk about with clients, but being able to share it with you, I think, is helpful as well to get an even better sense of the market and how competitive things are out there in any given week. So let's talk about the Market Watch stats here. So new listings last week in King and Snohomish County, 478. We're seeing those listing numbers ticking up. We're seeing more and more listings coming on the market, which is great. That's what you want to see this time of year. We're still seeing some price reductions, not as many as we were seeing. I think people are pricing better as we're going into the new year. And also, I think that some of the listings that maybe were on the market for a long time are not seeing those price reductions. But still, it's tough sometimes on certain properties to pin the price perfectly. And even in certain segments, whether that's the condo market or it's the luxury market, every market has a little bit different strategy right now. And, depending on how long you expect the property to be on the market, will also determine how you want to price it. You don't want to just price the house lower when there aren't a lot of buyers, right? So if you're in the luxury market, there are very few people potentially that are going to purchase the property. You don't want to just start dropping the price every couple of weeks until you find a buyer. It's not necessarily the way you want to market a luxury property. And the same would be said for maybe a condo in Seattle, where the market is not as competitive either, and there aren't as many buyers in the market. You're not going to want to drop the price as regularly or as often as maybe a single family house, where you could say, well, all these other ones are selling really quickly. Either there's something really wrong with this house, or we're just a little bit high on the price. So a little bit different if you're in the median range for single family houses. Now, as we're looking at contingent sales, there still are some contingent sales, but few in King and Snohomish County. And you think about it, 9 contingent sales out of 603 pendings, right? And some of those were pending inspection already and went to pending. So for clarity, we're always, when we're looking at this number, seeing closer to sold is the motto. Majority of those, maybe 2/3 to 3/4 would be brand new pendings, but still we're seeing a lot of houses coming off the market and not very many in the contingent status. I think that's important to remember. And contingencies, when you are selling your house and buying at the same time, and that new purchase is contingent on the sale. There are other contingencies in a contract in real estate, but in this case, it's specifically referring to, are you selling your house as part of the contract to purchase the new one? And then when we look at solds, 400 sold listings here, a little bit less than the new listings. And what we've already seen is that the inventory has been picking up. Last week, I did the monthly market update, and January's inventory was up, and February's, I think, will also be up. So we're starting to trend up in inventory a little bit earlier than we have in the past few years. And what I think that means for sellers is that the, ideal window, and we're always trying to guess what this is going to be for any given year. This year, I think that the ideal window is going to be a little bit earlier rather than later in the spring. And even now, I'm seeing houses selling really quick in the median range. And I've had buyers that have been encountering multiple offers and sellers that are trying to get their house on the market right now, right? Because they want to take advantage of this window where you have lower inventory and you have buyers that are excited to purchase. What happens as the spring wears on and the summer comes is you start to see a lot more options and you start to see buyers getting houses, and that pool dies out a little bit and you have a lot more houses. And typically that's when you start to see the seasonal cycle of prices going down a little bit. And so in this case, we're trending up, but we're starting to see the inventory numbers picking up a little bit quicker than in the previous couple years. Interest rates also are still hovering right around 7%. Mortgage News Daily says 7.02 on average for a 30-year fixed rate. And they also, their headline for the day is that mortgage rates have hit their lowest since December 17th, but we're talking about 0.0 something percent, right? They've been pretty steady if you've been following along, somewhere between 7% and 7.1% over the past month or so. Now, the exciting part, right? This is a little bit different. I want to share some of these pending stats from the MLS, and I think these are pretty valuable to know. So if we're let's look at Snohomish County first. We're going to see that over the last week, 727,500 was the median price for pending listings. And then the percentage of asking price, or the average percent of the list price in Snohomish County, was 100% over the past week. Not too much, not too little, right? Just at the asking price. Again, average. Pendings with multiple offers. So this is where you're going to think, okay, well, if the average is 100%, you're going to have, if 30% receive multiple offers, the chance is that some of these are selling over asking price. And that's where you'll also see, if we go to the last one here, pendings with an escalation addendum, 10% in Snohomish County. That's actually not that many, right? That's a pretty low percentage, but still 10% of the listings going over, most likely, asking price, or at least including the escalation addendum. The other couple things to look at, and again, these have to do with competition and how offers are structured. 44% of offers had an inspection contingency in Snohomish County, and 75% had a financing addendum. So what we're seeing, and this has been a trend over the past few years, I would even say since COVID, that we're seeing fewer inspection contingencies per 100 offers versus the financing contingency, I would say, has been remaining relatively steady. And a big part of that is because sellers are doing pre-inspections before listing their property, and some buyers will still get their own inspection, and there's no reason the buyer needs to take or rely on this pre-inspection. But if it ends up being competitive, where the buyer doesn't want to spend the money and is willing to take the inspection that's been given, sometimes they will remove that contingency. King County, if we scroll down a little bit here, we're looking at $875 was the median sales price over the past week. We've seen the percentage over asking price on average a little bit higher than Snohomish County, so 2% over asking price. And part of that, looking down at the escalation addendums that were included, 16% in King County had the escalation addendums. If we look at the financing addendums, fewer financing addendums in King County, 63%. So the 75% of the pending listings in Snohomish County over the last week had a financing addendum versus 63% in King County. And the same would be said for the pendings with an inspection. So 44% in Snohomish County had pendings, 36% had the inspection contingency in King County. And the multiple offers as well, for 40% in King County, 30% in Snohomish County. So all this makes sense, right? When you have multiple offers, you tend to have fewer contingencies, a higher sales price. And when we're looking at the data, it makes a lot of sense that if you have more multiple offers, you're going to have fewer inspection contingencies and fewer financing addendums. And interestingly, right, if 30% versus 40%, right, you have a 10% difference. You also have, and you have an almost 10%, 8% difference in inspections included, and you have a 12% difference on the financing addendums included. So I think a big piece of that is that you're going to see fewer contingencies, as we talked about, as a result of the multiple offers. And buyers always want to protect themselves, and that's what those contingencies do. But when you're in a multiple offer scenario, you have to decide how much you want to protect yourself. The ultimate goal is to purchase the house. So as long as you're able to purchase the house successfully and you're comfortable and confident about the condition of the house, right? And the pre-inspection can help with that a lot. Or you can even get your own pre-inspection ahead of time. That's another strategy to set yourself apart. And you're confident in your financing. As long as you get to the table, get to the end of the process, the amount of contingencies you include aren't super important. But if you did need to back out or wanted to for some reason, like the inspection or the financing falls through, that's where you're at risk of losing your earnest money. And that's your good faith deposit, typically 2 to 3% of the purchase price for buyers, up to 5% in Washington state, the seller can keep. There are lots of different strategies and tactics around negotiations, and a lot of it comes down to how competitive is the offer situation? What's the market look like right now? So if you're a buyer and you're hearing all this and you're like, whoa, this is so much to take in, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and talk through some of these things, right? Especially if you're just getting started with your home search. Talking through the process is probably the most valuable thing that you can do getting started. I think for buyers and sellers, sometimes having all this information is awesome, but applying it in the moment can sometimes be tricky. So if you have any questions about your situation or how this data applies to you, drop a comment. I'd love to interact. If you want to connect with me personally, I'm happy to do so. I'd love to be a resource for you.